She told me I didn't belong in her son's life, not because of anything I did, but because of who I am. She tried to erase me from my own wedding, humiliate me in front of people I loved.
But the silence that followed wasn't defeat. It was strategy. And what happened next?
Let's just say,
Claudine Bellamy never saw it coming. From where are you watching this video?
Tell us in the comments, and stay with me, because the ending will leave you breathless.
Some women dream of weddings.
Leona West dreamed of silence, of being left alone, unjudged, unmeasured. She never imagined love would feel like having to defend her place in someone else's world. She met Spencer Alden during a policy fellowship in Cambridge, two ambitious minds colliding over shared readings, late-night debates, and the kind of laughter that softens even the most guarded hearts. Spencer was everything she wasn't supposed to reach for: old East Coast money, polished manners, family homes in Nantucket and Savannah, with a surname that opened doors before he ever introduced himself. Leona, born and raised in Birmingham, was her father's daughter, quietly brilliant, proudly self-made. Her father, Elijah West, worked double shifts in the postal service and never missed a parent-teacher night. Education, he always said, is your armor in a world that forgets your name the minute you leave the room.
Leona listened.
By 28, she'd built her own strategy consulting firm, advising UK startups on growth, ethics, and sustainability.
She didn't shout her accomplishments. She didn't lead with wealth. She led with results.
And that's exactly how Spencer fell for her. But love, Leona learned, doesn't always prepare you for the politics of family. The first time she met Claudine Bellamy, Spencer's mother, the room temperature dropped without a thermostat.
It was over dinner at the Alden estate in Charleston.
Leona wore navy silk, understated jewelry, and brought a bottle of French wine as a hostess gift. Claudine accepted it like one might accept a candle from a child. Polite, but dismissive. "So, Leona," she said mid-meal, knife resting perfectly on her plate, "what is it you do, again?"
"Consulting, how intriguing. Sounds very adaptable." Adaptable. As in, unrooted.
As in, unstable.
Spencer laughed nervously.
Leona smiled. Soft, unreadable, practiced.
She'd heard this tone before.
The kind that doesn't scream racism or classism, but lets it drip like condensation off fine glass.
Claudine never raised her voice. She didn't need to.
Her criticisms came in the form of unreturned calls, ignored invitations, and compliments with blades hidden inside.
5 years of birthdays forgotten.
Family holidays where Leona was labeled Spencer's companion. When Spencer proposed, Claudine sent a bouquet, not to Leona, but to Spencer, with a card that read, "Whatever makes you happy, darling." Leona told herself it didn't matter. That love would be enough. That eventually, Claudine would come around. But deep down, something hurt more than Claudine's words: Spencer's silence. Every time Claudine crossed a line, Spencer stood on the edge of the chalkboard, erasing it instead of defending her. And Leona, dignified as always, never begged.
Never asked. She waited. Until the wedding planning began. That's when things changed.
That's when Leona realized that invisibility doesn't protect you. It just gives your enemies more room to draw you out of frame. And this time, she was done shrinking. Leona didn't want a wedding that screamed money.
She wanted one that whispered legacy.
It was her idea to hold the ceremony in the Cotswolds, rolling green hills, stone chapels with ivy-covered walls, a small manor house with fireplaces that had been lit for centuries.
It wasn't about the venue. It was about the meaning.
About standing in a place built to last, built to weather. Like her.
Like what she thought her love was. Spencer said yes to everything.
The location, the minimalist guest list, the soft jazz quartet.
But every agreement came with a subtle delay. A glance at his phone. A quiet sigh.
A moment when he hesitated before saying, "Of course, whatever you want."
Leona noticed.
And then came Claudine's edits. First, it was the guest list. She sent Leona an updated version with nearly 60 more names: investors, politicians, family friends.
All of them white, all of them influential. "You'll thank me later," she wrote in her email. Then came the florist.
Claudine replaced the local vendor with a luxury designer who specialized in statement floral moments. Leona had wanted wildflowers, lavender, chamomile, baby's breath. Flowers her mother once grew in a window box before she passed. Claudine preferred orchids and calla lilies. "Wildflowers are charming," she said in a call, "but they don't photograph well. This isn't a picnic, Leona."
Leona didn't push back. Not yet.
Because there was one moment she was holding on to, the vow exchange.
She had written hers by hand. Not showy. Not performative. Just honest.
Full of lines about weathering storms, protecting each other's peace, building together. She imagined Spencer would meet her halfway, vulnerable, present, real.
But 1 week before the wedding, Claudine called her directly.
"Leona, I hope you won't take this the wrong way," she began. And Leona already knew, whenever a woman like Claudine starts a sentence that way, it never ends in kindness. "But it might be better if you didn't include anything too personal in your vows.
Keep it classic. Timeless.
Don't make people uncomfortable."
Leona froze.
"Uncomfortable how?" "Well," Claudine sighed, "you have such a passionate way of expressing things."
"Spencer is a private man. I'm sure you understand." Leona hung up. No response. No argument. Just a slow, quiet breath.
That night, she watched Spencer sleep beside her.
Peaceful. Unbothered.
As if nothing in his life needed defending.
She wanted to shake him.
Ask him if he understood what it meant to shrink, over and over, for someone else's comfort. But the words stayed lodged behind her ribs.
Instead, she sat in the dark, rewriting her vows. She crossed out lines about her mother.
About her father's advice. About the nights she thought she'd never belong in any room that Claudine Bellamy walked through.
She rewrote them with more polish.
Less emotion.
More silence.
Because by now, silence was all this union seemed to respect.
But something inside her was beginning to shift. Not with noise.
Not with fury. But with a steady, growing stillness, the kind that only exists before a storm. And this time, Leona wasn't walking into a wedding.
She was stepping onto a battlefield.
The morning of the wedding smelled like rain, not storm, just wait. The sky hung low over the hills, a thick silver mist curling around the windows of the manor house. Leona stood in front of the tall mirror in her bridal suite, wrapped in silence. Her gown was ivory satin, long-sleeved, simple. No sparkles, no corset, no veil, just clean lines and legacy stitched in silk. Her father, Elijah, entered quietly. He wore a navy suit and the tie Leona had given him when she got her first client, midnight blue with a subtle embroidered pattern. "You look like your mother today," he said, his voice catching.
"And you're holding yourself like her too. Chin up.
Eyes soft. Steel underneath." Leona turned and hugged him.
Tight.
Without words. Outside, the ceremony unfolded beautifully.
The chapel's stone walls glowed with candlelight.
Spencer cried when he saw her walk down the aisle. The guests, nearly 200 of them, most of whom Leona had never met, watched with polite admiration. When it came time for vows, Leona read hers calmly. They were beautiful but clipped.
She didn't share the line about her mother's lavender.
Or the story of her father fixing her shoes with electrical tape before her first interview. She kept it clean.
Emotionally inoffensive.
Spencer read his vows like a speech, a charming performance, light on depth. She smiled, but her heart didn't move.
They were married by law, but not yet in truth.
The reception was held in a glass garden room overlooking the hills.
A string quartet played. Champagne flowed.
Claudine, dressed in silver, moved through the crowd like a queen inspecting her court. Leona stayed close to Elijah and a few longtime friends.
She didn't feel married. She felt managed. Until the toast.
Spencer's best man had just finished a light-hearted speech when Claudine tapped her glass with a spoon.
The room quieted.
She stood, back straight, eyes gleaming with practiced sincerity. "I just want to say a few words about today," she began. "Marriage is a serious union. One that must be entered with clarity, commitment, and trust. My Spencer," she placed a hand over her heart, "has always been someone who gives too easily, who believes in people more than he should. He's romantic like that."
Soft laughter. Claudine turned toward Leona.
"But I do hope, truly, that this union is based on more than timing and ambition. Because love built on convenience, or strategic gain, well, it never lasts. And our family has endured too much to watch that happen."
The silence that followed was absolute. Leona didn't blink.
She waited for Spencer.
Just a look. A word. He smiled awkwardly. Lifted his champagne flute.
"To new beginnings," he said, as if that could fix it.
That was the moment. Not Claudine's insult.
Not the guest's discomfort.
Not the whispers. Spencer's silence. Leona stood slowly.
Claudine's smug satisfaction faltered. I'll be right back, Leona said, to no one in particular. She left the hall, walked back into the manor, and closed the door behind her. Then, calmly, she pulled out her phone. Dialed one number.
Waited. Ethan? Yes. Go ahead. Execute it. Today. All of it. There was a pause.
Then she smiled. Because I'm not going to be someone's silent ornament. I'm going to be the headline.
Leona didn't run.
She didn't sob in a bathroom or disappear into the woods behind the venue like a bride on the brink. That would have been easier. For them. Instead, she walked back into the room with a different posture. Her shoulders weren't tense. Her face wasn't cracked. What changed was deeper. A thread had been cut. A promise to keep shrinking so others could stay comfortable had finally, irrevocably, snapped.
Claudine spotted her first.
Darling, are you all right? She asked, with that practiced sweetness that had always tasted like ash.
Leona didn't answer.
She just took the microphone from the startled wedding planner and walked to the center of the room. The quartet fell silent. Glasses paused midair. Conversations died. Thank you all for being here, Leona said, her voice clear.
Calm.
The kind of calm that scares people more than shouting ever could. This day was supposed to be a celebration of love, of commitment, of two families coming together. She glanced at Spencer, who looked confused, but not alarmed.
Not yet.
I planned every part of this wedding with one goal, to make it real.
Intimate. Truthful.
But it seems truth makes some people uncomfortable. So, let me offer some clarity.
She paused.
Not for effect, but for breath. I come from a family where loyalty is spoken in actions. Where love doesn't mean ownership. My father taught me that your value isn't determined by who accepts you, but by what you build when no one believes in you. Her eyes flicked to Claudine, who froze. For 5 years, I tried to earn a place in this family. I adapted.
Smiled when I was insulted. Swallowed every slight.
But the thing about swallowing your dignity long enough, eventually, it becomes hunger.
The crowd was silent.
Even the servers had stopped moving. Leona looked at Spencer. When your mother tried to shame me today, I wasn't surprised. But when you said nothing, that broke something I can't repair. Leona, Spencer said softly, stepping forward. Please. Let's talk. She didn't move.
I did talk.
I did everything right. I made myself small so your mother could feel big. I wrote vows and rewrote them and deleted parts of myself just to be allowed in the room. But today, I realized, I was never in the room. I was decoration. She turned slightly, her voice colder now. Measured.
But I'm not here to beg. I'm here to announce something.
She reached into her clutch and pulled out a document, one Ethan had sent to her moments after that call.
She raised it slightly.
As of today, I've completed a full buyout of the firm I co-founded. Effective immediately, I am the sole owner and CEO of West End Wells Strategies. It's now a multinational consultancy with offices in London, Amsterdam, and New York.
The gasps were audible. But she wasn't done. Your mother once asked what I do. Well, I build. Silently. Intentionally. And now, without apology. Spencer stepped closer.
Why are you doing this now? She looked at him, and for the first time, she saw him clearly. Because I want you to feel what I've felt for 5 years. Invisible.
Undervalued. Mistrusted.
And I want your mother to understand what it means when the woman she tried to erase becomes the name on every business card her circle will ever need.
Then she handed the microphone back. No tears. No drama.
Just a full-bodied silence that said, this is not a tantrum.
This is an exit.
And Leona West walked away from her wedding without a word of goodbye.
Not to hurt anyone, but to finally protect herself.
The wedding was never annulled.
It was erased.
3 days after walking out of that garden room, Leona filed for separation and submitted a public statement through her firm's legal counsel. No comment, no regrets. Claudine tried to control the narrative. She told her friends it was a misunderstanding, that Leona had been overwhelmed, that Spencer was heartbroken. But money has a short memory, and power doesn't follow whispers, it follows headlines. And Leona West had just written one in permanent ink. She didn't run to Paris. She didn't buy a penthouse in Manhattan. She went back to London. Back to her 2-bedroom flat where the walls still smelled like hard work and microwave dinners from her grad school days.
But everything was different.
West End Wells Strategies became more than a consultancy, it became a movement. She opened a second office in Brooklyn and staffed it entirely with women from underserved backgrounds. She created an internship program with no degree requirement, just vision and grit. She published her first white paper on invisible leadership, which was later cited in Harvard case studies. The world noticed. TED Talks, corporate retreats, panel after panel, where she sat at tables once gate-kept by men in blazers and last names that opened doors like passwords. They didn't know how to label her, too elegant to be aggressive, too focused to be dismissed.
She never mentioned Claudine. Or Spencer.
Not once.
Her revenge was never their downfall.
It was her survival. But sometimes, survival carries echoes. A year and a half later, Leona was invited to speak at a global leadership summit in Copenhagen. She walked onto the stage in a charcoal-tailored suit, nothing extravagant.
Just presence. Just truth.
Halfway through her talk, her eyes scanned the crowd. And there she was.
Claudine Bellamy. Front row.
Not as a speaker. Not even as a guest of honor. Just attending.
She wore the same smug expression.
But her eyes, those had changed.
Softer. Sharper. Less sure of themselves.
Leona didn't flinch. She continued her talk. Sometimes, silence isn't weakness.
It's rehearsal.
And when you've been practicing dignity for years in the background, your voice doesn't shake when it's finally time to speak.
Applause roared. But Leona didn't smile for it. She smiled for herself.
After the talk, Claudine approached her.
No cameras. No audience. Just the two of them, finally eye to eye.
Leona, she said, voice tight. I didn't know.
I didn't realize who you were. Who you are.
Leona's response was simple. You didn't care.
Claudine blinked.
Do you think, maybe, we could have a conversation? Start over, perhaps? Leona studied her face. I spent 5 years trying to earn your respect by erasing parts of myself.
You didn't just ignore me.
You trained your son to ignore me too.
A beat of silence. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm not even here to gloat.
I'm here because I outgrew the table you didn't want me sitting at.
Claudine lowered her eyes.
I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Leona paused, nodded once, and extended her hand. Then let's begin with honesty. Not friendship. Just truth.
They shook. Not because Leona needed closure.
But because power doesn't always look like dominance. Sometimes it looks like walking past someone who tried to block your path, and offering them a bridge instead of a wall. The headlines moved on. Eventually, Claudine's whispers faded into wine-stained dinner parties and forgotten RSVPs. Spencer remarried, another polished socialite, another safe choice. They were photographed at galas and fundraisers, always smiling, always polished.
But Leona never looked back.
She was building something bigger. By the time her third office opened in Toronto, West End Wells wasn't just a firm.
It was a philosophy. Universities studied it. Boards quoted it. And the women she mentored? They called her something she never claimed aloud. A force.
Her father, Elijah, watched it all quietly from his home in Birmingham.
He didn't boast. He didn't beam.
But one afternoon, he pulled out an old showbox where he kept her report cards and newspaper clippings, laid them on the kitchen table, and simply said, This is why I stayed up all those nights. One day, while walking the coastline near Brighton, Leona stopped in front of an old estate overlooking the sea. The windows were cracked, the roof weathered, the gate half-hanging. But something about it felt honest, real. Like her. She bought it. Not because she needed another property. Because she wanted to restore something broken into something beautiful. Years later, she transformed that estate into the West House, part retreat center, part leadership incubator. Young women, many of them first generation, overlooked, told they weren't enough, gathered there every season to learn, heal, and lead. They studied negotiation, finance, emotional resilience, and something Leona called presence without apology. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to Claudine. Not to Spencer. Not even to herself. But she kept one letter, tucked in the back of her journal. From Spencer. Written 2 years after their wedding. Regretful. Messy. Conflicted. He had written, I thought protecting you meant staying neutral. I see now, that silence wasn't peace. It was betrayal. Leona never replied. Because forgiveness didn't require permission. It required distance. And she had finally given herself that gift. She stood one morning at the back terrace of the West House, tea in hand, sunlight catching the ocean like spilled gold. A young mentee walked up beside her. "Ms. West," the girl said softly, "how do you know when you've made it?"
Leona didn't answer right away.
She looked out at the sea, felt the wind press gently against her shoulders. "When you stop waiting for someone to let you in," she said, "and start building doors for others."
The girl nodded. And Leona smiled. Not the kind of smile you give to cameras.
The kind you give to yourself. Because in the end, this wasn't a story about a wedding ruined. It was about a woman reclaimed. This story is a reminder. Your silence doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're calculating the exact moment to rise. Hit like to honor every time you chose self-respect over being accepted.
Share this with someone who's done the same.
And subscribe for more stories that don't just inspire, they unleash something in you. Now tell me in the comments, what's one moment you knew you were done shrinking to fit in? I want to hear your story.